Before the embalming began, before a single organ was removed or a thread of linen wrapped the skin, there was silence, a moment that connected earth to sky, a pause where the priests stood still, heads tilted upward, waiting, not for a sign from the gods, but for a signal from the stars. They weren't just watching the heavens, they were listening, watching for one star in particular, Sirius, the brightest star in the sky. To us, it might just be light, but to the ancient Egyptians, Sirius wasn't just a star, it was a gate, a cosmic doorway, and its return just before sunrise meant that something sacred could finally begin. They believed this star marked more than the Nile flood. It marked the soul's journey from the body to eternity. Without its rising, the ritual of mummification wouldn't truly begin. Because they weren't just preserving the dead, they were preparing the soul for a journey through the stars. When death came, the body was not immediately buried. It was taken to a special place known as the House of Purification. The priests who worked there were more than caretakers. They were spiritual engineers. They wore masks shaped like jackals to honor Anubis, the god of embalming. With ritual water from the Nile, they gently washed the body, cleansing not just the skin, but the soul. Then came incense. Clouds of frankincense and myrrh drifted over the body, not only to hide the scent of death, but to protect the space. The Egyptians believed that the spirit of chaos, Seth, would try to interfere with the transition from life to afterlife, so they cleansed the room with sound, scent, and sacred intention. Only after all this, after the body had been purified in silence and prayer, did the physical process begin. The first cut was more than a medical act. It was sacred. A long incision was made, usually on the left side of the abdomen. Through it, the embalmers carefully removed the internal organs, the stomach, the liver, the intestines, and the lungs. Each was gently cleaned with palm wine and herbs, but they weren't discarded. Instead, they were placed in special containers called canopic jars. Each jar was protected by one of the 4 sons of Horus, ancient guardians of the body's inner life. The liver was guarded by Imseti, the lungs by Hapi, the stomach by Duamutef, the intestines by Kebasenuef. Each jar was placed in alignment with the cardinal directions, anchoring the soul within the universe. Interestingly, the heart, the most sacred organ, was often left inside the body. Egyptians believed it carried the person's thoughts, memories, and morality. But the brain? That was pulled out through the nose with hooked tools and thrown away. With the organs removed, the body was filled with bundles of linen and buried in a bed of natron, a naturally occurring desert salt. For 40 full days, the body would rest there, silent, drying, becoming something else. This wasn't just preservation, it was purification. The natron dried the flesh, but also purified the spiritual residue left in the body. And more mysteriously, it matched the 40-day period when Sirius disappeared from the sky, hidden by the sun. To the Egyptians, this wasn't coincidence. They believed that while the body dried in salt, the soul was also on its own invisible journey, following Sirius through the hidden realm. When the star returned, the soul was ready to rise, ready to come home. After the 40 days passed, the dried body was lifted from the salt. The priests washed it again, this time with sacred oils, cedar resin, and spiced wine. They believed the skin needed to be softened and sealed, as if it were being reborn. Inside the hollow body, they placed sweet-smelling herbs, sawdust, and linen. This wasn't about stuffing it like a doll. It was about restoring the body's shape, so that the soul could recognize its home when it returned. Sometimes even false eyes were placed in the sockets. The mouth and nose were sealed with wax or resin. Everything had meaning. Every action was a spell. The outer skin was painted, gold for royals, red ochre for men, yellow for women. Each color represented divinity. This wasn't a corpse anymore. It was a vessel of light. Then began the most meticulous part, the wrapping. The process could take weeks. Layer after layer, the body was wrapped in linen, hundreds of meters of it. Each finger, each toe, wrapped separately, with tiny amulets placed in between. The wrappings weren't just for protection, they were memory. With each layer, a priest whispered prayers, often taken from the Book of the Dead. These spells were believed to activate the linen, turning it into spiritual armor. Scarabs, ankhs, the Eye of Horus, symbols of protection were placed directly on the chest, the throat, the forehead. By the time the final cloth was tied, the person was no longer dead. They were becoming divine, but something was still missing. The senses. The soul needed to hear, to speak, to breathe again. That's when the most sacred ritual took place, the opening of the mouth. A priest, often dressed as the son of the deceased, would approach the wrapped body. In his hand he carried two tools, a ceremonial adze and a curved blade called a peseshkef, originally used to cut umbilical cords. Because death to the Egyptians was a second birth. With each touch to the lips, the eyes, the ears, the priest chanted, "May your mouth be opened. May your eyes see. May your voice return." It was believed that in that moment the spirit could speak again, not to us, but to the gods. The wrapped body was then placed inside a coffin, sometimes 2 or 3, all painted with stars, gods, and protective spells. The family followed in a procession. Offerings of bread, beer, meat, and incense were made. In the tomb, one last gift was left, a scroll, sometimes over 70 feet long. This was the Book of the Dead, not a single book, but a collection of spells and instructions, a guidebook for the underworld, for the journey ahead. Because the soul's path wasn't easy, it would have to cross rivers, pass through fire, and face monsters, and at the end it would enter the Hall of Judgment. There its heart would be weighed against a feather, the feather of truth. If it was light, the soul entered paradise. If heavy, it would be eaten by a creature named Amit, erased forever. So why did they go to such lengths? Why take 70 days, carve the stars into coffins, whisper spells into cloth, or wait for a star to rise before even starting? Because to them, death was not the end. It was an equation, a cosmic plan, a reunion between body, soul, and the stars. And in the silence of that ancient desert, before the oils, before the linen, there was always a prayer, not to a god, but to the sky,